I'm going to silence my phone.
Okay.
Hold on. That's a thing I should do. I already did. Okay, I'm a step ahead of myself. Sorry, abundance of caution.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
Am I on the mark again, just with the shot?
Yeah, you're good. All right. Cool. So I got to do everything because Jen's out. Let me just send the text out.
Okay.
Shahid. Text. Status Coup. 2895496. Cool. All right. Delighted to be joined by Shahid Buttar. He is running against Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco. So obviously we're going to get into that. We are going to get into obviously grim news, 200,000 deaths related to coronavirus. And we are obviously going to get into the Supreme Court battle. First, I'll start with the elephant in the room. A couple weeks ago, I believe, there was some accusations made relating to you, your staff. Some of it seemed pretty salacious and dire. Some of it seemed kind of vague to me. So I've looked into it. The Intercept's looked into it. I guess a couple local outlets in San Francisco looked into it. First, I want to start with the kind of flashing red blink lights that I think have been fairly debunked. There was some claims that there was sexual harassment by one woman, not even related to your campaign, but years previously. And based on the Intercept's report and some other people that have come out, it seems that her allegation, she's made allegations in the past that have been suspect. So what do you know of this woman? And, just on the record, is there any validity to any claims of sexual harassment?
Yeah, all the claims are false. All of the claims. My former colleagues have brought forward about half a dozen different smears, and all of them have been debunked. The one that you're describing at the moment, my accuser in that first claim that they brought forward, actually the second of their claims that they brought forward, she had previously accused me of murder 5 years ago. She's accused me of human trafficking. She's accused a number of other political candidates of harassment, and she herself has been accused by other people of things that she has claimed that I have done. And, these are things that I didn't say at the time because I remain committed to standing with survivors. And I'm just sharing now facts that have been reported by other outlets. I would invite people to consider facts rather than leaping to conclusions, particularly as a brown man falsely accused by a white woman and presumptively judged in public. I have been subjected to a process that any number of people before me have as well. And I'm simply grateful to still be standing at the end of it.
So
Just to be clear there, to get it across, because I hear that it's confusing. Someone accused me of things that she herself had been accused of by someone else in Los Angeles. And just to be clear here, you mentioned that local press looked into it. That never happened. Local press, I don't know quite how to describe it. You could say it's a failure of press ethics. You could say it's a failure of journalism. You could say it's white supremacy in media. Local press amplified demonstrably false accusations. The San Francisco Chronicle has twice quoted this person who we're describing, who was used by my former staff, people I replaced after I won the primary. Her story was used by those people to bring their concerns about my campaign strategy into the press. And there's so many failures of ethics throughout that process. As I reflect on it in the wake of many of the local organizations that had endorsed our campaign, rescinding their endorsements while ignoring evidence and witnesses demonstrating that the claims made about me were made in bad faith, those organizations ultimately neutralized themselves. And, it's everybody from Progressive Democrats of America to Democratic Socialism of America to the Tenants Union. And, these are networks that claim to stand for universal health care, claim to support climate justice, claim to support movements to defund the police. But in the first race in a generation, presenting San Francisco the chance to send a voice to Washington aligned with those values, all of those organizations have chosen to silence themselves. And as a brown man falsely accused by a white woman, I'm in a particularly inopportune position to reflect upon what is happening and what has happened in San Francisco. I think it is a very troubling set of events, not for me, but for race and this city. This is not a city that I think in any way would be proud of white supremacy emerging in it. This is not a city where I think anybody involved in the smear campaign targeting me was racist. It doesn't take prejudice to advance white supremacy. It just takes a willingness to ignore evidence and witnesses and to lean into accusations, especially when they're made by white women, of brown men. Mm-hmm. And I don't quite know what to say about it. I'm here fighting for climate justice. I'm here fighting for racial justice. I'm here fighting for struggling Americans challenged by intersecting social crises. And I was basically set upon by a group of political campaign operatives who saw a political benefit in lighting our campaign on fire. And it is unfortunate that it was amplified by the press. It's unfortunate that it was presumed valid by local organizations. I think it's more unfortunate for, unfortunately, the future generations that are dealing with the climate catastrophe, supported and enabled by the incumbent, while those networks silence themselves.
And one more question on this, we'll move on. Listen, I've been on the road for 6 years. The dirty little secret, I think you would agree with it. There's a lot of amazing things happening in the progressive movement, but in anything, when you have so much of this built up through activists and activism, we love activism, but there's also a lot of people in activism that are, missing a few screws, to say it generously. There's also activism and movements are the personification of what I call the political game of telephone. Something innocent could then turn into, you're a sexual harasser, you're this, you're that, because lies travel very quickly. Even sometimes people spreading the lies aren't even meaning malice. They just, frankly, things get distorted. With that said, I think it's fair to take the sexual harassment off the table because I don't think there's any evidence of that. The Intercept ran an article that really, there was a lot of individuals that basically claimed, I would just call it verbal abuse, a really rough managerial style. Maybe this is a generational thing. Like, I just turned 34. I know political campaigns. To me, hearing that a political candidate can scream at workers is not exactly a capital offense, but it doesn't mean it's...
Just to be clear, I don't do that either.
Okay.
It's interesting because the character constructed in the smear campaign bears no relationship to who I actually am. And any number of people have said it, all of whom have been silenced by the press. The voice that I most am eager to see finally emerge, and she's spoken out publicly in any number of forums here. She's been bullied for it. She's been ignored by the local press. Gloria Berry is an Afro-Latina grandmother. She's a community activist. She's an elected member of the Democratic County Central Committee here in San Francisco, and she has reflected in quite stark terms what has been happening here. And it is basically a unfortunate reflection of institutional racism and a race to judgment, not just about the harassment claims, but also about these claims around misogyny in the workplace. First of all, I'm an immigrant Muslim man, and there is a trope about misogyny in Muslim men that was inescapably implicated by the smear campaign. Further, there were all kinds of volunteers, many closer to the campaign than the paid staff, who in most of those cases barely worked with me for a few weeks. And the volunteers all noted what frankly, the staff acknowledged when they left my campaign, which was that we had profound tensions around strategy. I'm not a screamer. I'm not a yeller. They accused me of berating them and what that basically means. And it is true. We had to have the same conversation over and over and over again. And it's unfortunate because I hired people who were relatively recent in their careers to play roles that were somewhat, above the rim of their experience. And I had hoped that they would be coachable and guidable, but they had their own ideas of what to do. I think a lot of this is generational. I had folks with a sense of, certainly any number of entitlements. And, part of their entitlement was to perceive my rejection of their campaign advice as somehow indicating that I wasn't qualified to be a candidate. And I think, the story they told themselves is that, constructing these lies about me was some way for them to perform the public service of revealing to the public that I'm a fraud, except that I am objectively the strongest candidate in a generation to seek the seat. And the people who are presuming to judge me and think that I'm not a qualified candidate have never done anything like any of the work I've done. So I have a hard time, frankly, seeing how anybody took any of this seriously. Like the accusations, the issues are super serious, but I haven't done any of this stuff. And there's any number of people who've said it, all of whom have been silenced, while a number of people who I replaced on my team with a fairly obvious interest in bringing me down because they're no longer working on my team. And they've, these are establishment figures from San Francisco who work for establishment figures in San Francisco who are beholden to the incumbent. So this was absolutely a politically motivated attack that was amplified by not only media institutions, but local grassroots groups. And the amplification of a campaign that was putting the career interests of professional campaign operatives before the movement and before an immigrant. I mean, to step back from this discreetly, I'd put it this way. The Me Too movement is responding to real concerns in our society. And it gained prominence by punching up, particularly at powerful, wealthy white men. I'm none of those things. I have no power. I have no authority. I have no property. I have no wealth. All I have is an audience and a 20-year history of fighting for our neighbors' rights. And that made me a target to some people who perceived an interest in tearing me down. And as much as it is unfortunate and disappointing to be the target of what amounts to a political lynching in San Francisco, I think the deeper harm here is to the movement, because there are real issues at stake. There is a fascist coup underway. There is a movement for racial justice in the streets. There is a climate crisis that is accelerating. And as the first Democrat in 30 years to face the incumbent Speaker of the House, I've spent a lot of time not talking about those issues, which is what the city and the country needs me to be talking about.
Two things. Totally my fault. Can you move over to the left? Because right now it looks like you have one arm.
Is that better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not the greatest at framing. Secondly, I promise, this is my last question on this, but I just want to do it justice. There was one thing in the piece that stood out to me. There was a male staffer who said, he didn't say anything about sexual harassment or anything, but he did say, my experience, I did see him be a little rougher in terms of, I guess, criticisms or rejecting ideas from female staff than he ever was with me or men. How do you react? How do you respond to just different treatment, or some would say misogyny, where you would reject ideas from female staffers but wouldn't treat men the same way?
I have the exact same reflection. That true is unfortunately just a flat out lie. The same person, I think you're talking about Patrick Cochran as the person quoted making that criticism. He claimed, I don't know if it was in the same article that you're citing from, that it took 3 or 4 men to convince me to agree with the perspective that a woman brought to the table. And that is so obviously demonstrably false, because I didn't have that many men on the team. Like, it's like they're just making up things that relate to problems in society and ascribing them to me, but the shoes don't fit. I didn't even have 3 or 4 men to whom to defer. Just to tug on that particular thread, Patrick, that particular staffer, wasn't in any of the meetings that I had that were supposedly tense. I mean, the meetings I had 2 senior colleagues who were women, my finance director and my campaign manager. And, Patrick, as a junior man on the team, he was a volunteer coordinator. He wasn't even witness to the conversations that the others were complaining about. So I would describe this as a movement among workers to maybe demonstrate solidarity with each other, as some of them were engaged in promoting a pack of lies. To make this really sharp, we have text messages. It took the Humanist Report to publish them, and it took a month for them to be revealed in public. We'd gotten them within days of the smear campaign being launched. A volunteer came forward who my former staff tried to recruit to join this campaign. And she said Patrick is the person in the texts with her, a white man trying to convince a white woman, one of my volunteers, that I had done something inappropriate. She says in the text messages, "This is sick. I'm not going to participate in your smear campaign." So just to be clear, that the way these are real problems. If I was like that, I would be gravely concerned. Frankly, I'm gravely concerned, even though I'm not like that, because a bunch of people think I am like that because some people said it because it served their interests. And these are real problems in society. It's why I don't act like that. At the end of the day, I would just say, I would hope to be judged on the basis of my actions as opposed to the accusations of people with an interest in promoting them. And this is why I think the perspectives of everybody from my current staff, my previous staff, people I worked with long before, my volunteers, all those people would be relevant. And they're exactly who no one has heard from because the press has silenced everyone. I have a volunteer who's been bullied into silence by the leadership of an LGBTQ Democratic club here in San Francisco that claims to be progressive while having endorsed the incumbent, who, derides the Green New Deal as a dream, opposes universal health care, gives an aspiring fascist tyrant unprecedented military budgets. And when you see progressive, self-described progressive clubs being gamed into conservative positions because the leaderships of the clubs are promoting a false narrative that is demonstrably false, that's been called out by witnesses, that we have evidence demonstrating is false, while kicking a brown immigrant down the stairs. And again, it's just so, it's something between embarrassing for the city and shameful. Mm-hmm. I'm in the unfortunate position of, of being the target of these smears. And I'm just grateful to some extent for the national press to have done the job that the local press failed so miserably to do. I'm disappointed in the local organizations. As a candidate, I run based on the strength of the movement, and what will put me in office is the movement. And I've watched at least some parts of the movement. I'll put it this way. The voices promoting the smear campaign targeting me include everyone from a South Asian labor law professor to an indigenous socialist candidate for the state Senate. And when you have socialists of color advancing white supremacy because they don't understand their own stated principles enough to stand behind them when it matters, it is a disappointing reflection on the movement.
By the way, just so people know, there were progressives, Badia Benjamin, some others who signed petition in defense of you. So I just want to put that out there. So thank you for...
Can I address that real quick?
Yeah.
It wasn't a petition, and it wasn't in defense of me. That was a mischaracterization by the Chronicle. That was a letter about my accuser, because everyone in Washington knows the person who accused me, mm-hmm. and they know the history here, which is exactly what the San Francisco press ignored when they used this ultimately spurious allegation to weaponize the concerns about my campaign strategy and workplace setting by the people I'd replaced on my team.
Got it. Let's talk about your campaign. So today, sorry, I had to ask all those. It's my job.
I get it. It's an unfortunate reflection of our democracy. It's among the reasons I fear we might get the democracy we deserve, and I hope to help make it better than that.
And by the way, I'm uniquely familiar with being smeared on the internet, so I understand. So 200,000 have died. That came out today. I'm not even sure that number's accurate. I think it's possibly a lot more than that weren't counted. So we have a president that went out last night. His quote was literally, it affects virtually nobody. We have a conservative, I think power play is being generous. I would say a judicial coup underway, considering their hypocrisy and inconsistencies with filling the vacancy of the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. When you consider what looks like now it's going to happen with Mitt Romney saying he will support a nominee before the election, possibly, that could be 50 to 75 years of conservative rule, give or take, on the Supreme Court. And we also have, it hasn't been talked about, we're going on 2 months since the expiration of that unemployment of $600. So I wanted to ask you, obviously you're running against Nancy Pelosi. The action really will be in the Senate if Democrats could stop anything in terms of this nominee. But
Not entirely.
it just seems like we have no opposition party in this country. Obviously, Trump is terrible. He's I think I'm removing quasi. He's a fascist. I think any competent person would have definitely. We would have had deaths. We would have had problems with coronavirus, not to this scale. But how do you defeat this if the Chuck Schumer, from what I hear, has no plan or to play hardball? Nancy Pelosi has talked about, no, we're not going to threaten a government shutdown, which to me, 8 days, by the way, till the government possibly shuts down without additional funding. So she said, no, we're not going to do that, which is a continuation of bringing a spoon to a knife fight.
Yes.
What is your response to me, they're meeting Republican treachery with, crickets?
The question in my mind is not whether Democrats are weak in their resistance to the coup underway or whether or not they are complicit. And it is alarming. And I want to make one, I'll get really sharp about this and then try to zoom back. Reproductive liberty is one reason that people are very concerned about the future of the Supreme Court, and they should be, because reproductive rights are the most basic, fundamental example of human autonomy. If you can't control your own body, there's no way any of us can claim to be free. And it is entirely on brand for Nancy Pelosi to duck into a punch of undermining reproductive liberty because she hasn't defended it in all the ways that she can. I mean, this very year, she endorsed Dan Lipinski in Illinois and Henry Cuellar in Texas. These are reproductive authoritarians, anti-choice Democrats. And she endorsed them over challenges by young progressive women of color who favored reproductive liberty. So what does that tell you? That suggests not weakness. That suggests something worse than that. And, I'm not going to chase conspiracy theories. I don't know what Nancy Pelosi wants to happen to the court, but to show up on national television within 36 hours of Justice Ginsburg's passing saying we're going to take options off the table is inexcusable. It is a profound failure of leadership at a time when we need people to show up for work. Now, the reason, again, I say that it might be complicity is this pattern is entirely well established in Nancy Pelosi's history. It's why I am running for office to replace her, because I can't bear to see my city represented by a voice who does so much in Washington to pave Trump's path, while claiming to resist him based entirely on theatrical photo ops. Kneeling in kente cloth, pointing across a table, tearing up a speech, none of that matters. What would have mattered is maybe not signing or stumping for the military authorization that gave Trump $750 billion in the middle of a pandemic to buy weapons that we don't even need. I mean, just to tug on that thread here, and this gets into the part of the failure of leadership, we have real national security crises confronting our country. There's a pandemic, there's a climate catastrophe that is killing Californians today. There is a threat to the republic's continuity in the form of, the tax on the post office and the ability to conduct an election by mail. Those are all real national security threats, not a single one of which the Defense Department can do anything about. So why are we hurling $750 billion at a department addressing threats that don't even rank in the top 3 at the moment? What sense does this make? That's the supposed opposition, and this, we'll just keep this rolling. Nancy Pelosi, you were talking about, do we have opposition in this country? Nancy Pelosi revived expired surveillance powers from the dead to give to Donald Trump, expanding his authority to suppress dissent within the United States. There was a crackdown by DHS goon squads in Portland and Kenosha. Democrats have been funding DHS for 17 years without a shred of oversight. I've watched all this in slow motion up close. I've worked in Washington twice as a leader, and before that as a senior staff of different civil rights organizations. And I have watched the corporate Democratic Party do everything they can to build this political moment. Fascism in America is not a recent fear for me. Many of us have seen it for decades. As a Muslim immigrant, it's been painfully obvious to me, particularly since 2001. And I've done everything I can over the last 20 years to stop it. And that included trying to stop Bush's wars and the Patriot Act. It included trying to stop Obama's deportations and drone strikes. It included challenging Trump's corruption. And it included, unfortunately, at every stage in those 20 years, having to also confront Nancy Pelosi's documented complicity. And the only reason she's been able to stay in Congress is because she raises as much money as she does and that she's managed to duck debates for 30 years. She hasn't debated anyone since 1987.
And I assume she has not agreed to a debate with you.
She is refused ever to even acknowledge that we exist. She pretends online as if she's running against Republicans, when the first challenger she's faced, the viable challenge this year, is from her left, and she claims as if her electoral antagonists are on the right, and it's not true at all. And I think that the fact that she gets a free pass from the local media for not debating anyone in 30 years is as in much an indictment of our democratic process as the smear campaign to which I was subjected by the local press. I mean, it's alarming to me to see an election coming up in a few weeks when the electorate hasn't even had a chance to hear from the candidates. Like, how do we invade other countries to impose democracy when we can't even figure it out here to that extent? And I think that for an incumbent to go 30 years without defending their record in public, it doesn't demonstrate a disrespect for me. It demonstrates a disrespect for the city and democracy. The entitlement that it reflects is, frankly, to me, as revolting as the incumbent's legislative history.
And folks, remember, press the like button. We got 420 people watching, so put that in your pipe and smoke it. And smash the like button, get more people watching. It's the thumbs up button right under the video.
I might do that while we're talking.
I also want to mention, I sent you this earlier, but in addition to the Democrats giving Trump, DHS, $740 billion have gone to military, just came out today that $1 billion of the CARES Act from March that went to the Pentagon, they gave the Pentagon $1 billion saying, hey, make masks and PPE equipment and preparedness for coronavirus material, in addition to creating the infrastructure for an eventual vaccine. Well, guess what? That $1 billion that went to the Pentagon for the coronavirus got redirected to basically defense contractors to make more weapons. What is your thoughts on that?
Entirely predictable, so unacceptable. I mean, my first reaction was to, not the acronym, but WTAF. And I don't understand how anybody gets away with this stuff. And it's not new. This is the kind of thing that has unfortunately been entirely well documented going back for decades. The architect of the military contracting system warned us that it would eat democracy and it would transform the spiritual character of the United States down to every city. That was Dwight Eisenhower. And I see his warnings demonstrated in a million different ways. I've written a chapter in a book about this, all the different ways in which his warning came true, from mass surveillance to tanks in the hands of local police departments to drone strikes to militarized police cracking down on dissent. Like this coup that we are witnessing has been unfolding in slow motion for at least 20 years. And if I had a nickel for every smug liberal who laughed at me while I talked about how bipartisan fascism was rising, I would be as wealthy as Nancy Pelosi. And I see, unfortunately, too many people who claim to be liberal, I'm using air quotes here, not understanding what the words mean. Like the word liberal has been so contorted in so many different ways. Like first it was demonized by the right wing in the 2000s, and now it kind of stands in for centrist. But like liberal is supposed to be people who understand liberty, right? In the 19th century, liberties were like construed against the state. Those are people we call libertarians. 20th century liberals came to understand that the market can be oppressive. So to be liberated from the market requires progressive social interventions. Those are liberals, but now liberals have emerged as like corporate defenders in an era when we have an entire generation having been shafted by corporate rule so viciously that socialism, for the first time in generations, is once again a majority opinion within the United States. We've never had opportunities to advance that vision electorally because our system is so skewed, from money in politics to skewed media representations. The way the Pentagon gets away with this kind of serial fraud, waste, and abuse, so many things to say here. I want to relate it back to the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which was like the grand larceny of $2.5 trillion, vastly outpacing $1 billion. Like for a mere $1 billion to have been misdirected feels like a drop in the bucket, knowing that the Pentagon has lost track of $21 trillion over the course of the last generation, which is just mind-numbing. Like, I don't think anybody can even conceive of that amount of money. $21 trillion is staggering. And that's as much money as the Pentagon has unable to account for. Where did it go? What happened to it? What are we using it for? A lot of it's just accounting errors, but a lot of it's not. And what we're talking about here in the misdirection of these COVID funds, it's even worse because this is money that was appropriated to deal with an actual crisis, a real national security crisis. So it's not just military fraud, waste, and abuse and corruption. It's making the crisis worse by taking money away from where it actually needs to be so that it can fill somebody's pocket. And that is not okay. Congress's first job is to check and balance the executive branch, and it has failed miserably time after time. And as much as the misdirection of these COVID funds makes the point, I see it demonstrated even more starkly in the runaway funding for DHS agencies. People are, and we should be, absolutely aghast. And I just find it entirely unacceptable that we're practicing eugenics in concentration camps at our nation's border. And anybody has the gall to debate whether or not fascism is ascendant in the United States. Every Democrat who funded DHS over the last 17 years should be removed from office. There's no reason we're funding agencies that are building concentration camps to then pull tactics straight out of the Nazi playbook. That is not acceptable. I expect that from Republicans. Too many Democrats do it too, and I'm done with it. I mean, that's why I'm running for Congress, to replace the head of the party, because Nancy Pelosi funded the concentration camps. Nancy Pelosi extended Trump's surveillance powers. Nancy Pelosi approved this military budget, the likes of which the world has never seen. Why is Donald Trump wielding the biggest checks for a military establishment that our planet and species have ever seen in the middle of a pandemic of all times? I mean, it's so grotesque. It amazes me that people go to work under a system like this and consent. We talk about living in a land of the free and a home of the brave. Those shoes fit increasingly poorly, as far as I can tell.
We should also point out that these same Democrats have been voting overwhelmingly to confirm district and non-Supreme Court judges all over the country.
Yes.
McConnell they're creating the Democrats are handing conservatives across the country a huge just generational advantage on the courts all over the country. And by the way, keep the super chats coming. I'll ask Shahid some of your questions in a little bit.
Can I go in on the judges really quick, just for a minute? Not about Ginsburg, but looking back, because you're raising a super important point that a lot of people on the left forget. And I have a particular interest in this. I worked for 3 years on the senior staff of the American Constitution Society for Law and Policy. ACS was founded in the wake of the Bush versus Gore decision to try to counter the influence of the Federalist Society, which since the 1970s has basically captured our federal courts and closed them as an avenue for justice. The courts are a crucial part of the constitutional design. Taking them off the table as a way for people to get relief when institutions like government agencies and corporations abuse us and our communities is a critical part of the right-wing project. Justice Lewis Powell laid out that strategy in an infamous memo where he basically forecast the centrality of the courts to promoting political perspectives. What Democrats, I've watched this for the better part of 20 years. I've spent 3 years helping prepare a pipeline of potential appointees for the next Democratic president. And I'm so disappointed in so many different ways in the legacy of the Obama administration. But one of the ones that I think he doesn't get enough blame for, and yes, there's the drone strikes, yes, the deportations, yes, the crackdown on the press, yes, failing to show up for working people, prepping the landscape for Trump. And I don't want to beat up on the Obama administration because he's frankly still probably I hate to say it, but the best president in my lifetime. The thing here that I'm particularly alarmed by is the judges, because when President Obama had the appointing authority, as a constitutional law professor who understood what was at stake more than anybody, he appointed prosecutors of color and called it a day. And that pipeline of progressive jurists that we prepared, one of them got nominated for a circuit court appointment. He didn't get confirmed, and the administration left him twisting in the wind. He ended up getting appointed to the California State Supreme Court, where he has an opportunity to advance the jurisprudence in a different arena. But this idea that Democrats have abdicated and conceded the judiciary long before now, this goes back into the Clinton era. Democrats, it's been 40 years since there was a president actively appointing actual progressive or liberal judges. Even when we've had Democratic presidents, they've still appointed prosecutors and corporate lawyers. They've just made sure that they were a diverse set of prosecutors and corporate lawyers, and the tokenization of representation and the tokenization of identity and the needs of our communities that have frankly been weaponized by a bipartisan establishment against us is a big part of the problem. And it's infected the judiciary in a way that's already, long before the Senate, allowed Trump in the last 4 years to reshape the judiciary and his ideological image. Something like a third of the judges have been appointed by this criminal president. Think about that for a second. The judges, the people we're supposed to go to when the government or corporations run roughshod over our rights, were appointed by this maniac with the consent of Democratic senators. What is the point of voting for Democrats when they pave the road for the right wing? And that's why I'm running against Pelosi, because there really is not any good answer to that question. And I'm tired of seeing the American people fleeced by people who are claiming to stand with us, especially knowing that there are so many people who are just overt in their predation. We need people to actually resist fascism. And if there's anything I know, it's how to do that. I'm a Muslim immigrant in the United States. I was in law school when 9/11 happened and the unfolding set of horrors that Paul Krugman, downplayed very prolifically recently. I mean, what my community's been subjected to, we're like canaries in a coal mine. And I've seen this coming for 20 years. And I've done everything I can to stop it, while Nancy Pelosi has unfortunately accelerated this crisis at every opportunity. And our city deserves better. Our country deserves better. The future deserves better. And I'm eager to do everything I can to get out of the position of saying yet again, I told you so, and hopefully helping us step over some of these predictable pitfalls into which the establishment keeps dragging us.
Let me ask you just a basic question. It's not meant to be a Debbie Downer. It's just meant realism. How does a guy like you win in California? I mean, I'm looking at the numbers for the primary. She got, obviously it wasn't a head-to-head, but she got 74% of the vote. You got 13%. Now it is, I think there's a Republican running in the general too, but I mean, there's not. Okay.
Just to be clear, I knocked all the Republicans out. Our primary system allows only the top two, and I am the first Democrat in 30 years. So that's how we win, first of all, is just by being another Democrat on the ballot. She's never had another Democrat against her ever in 30 years.
Well, what I mean by how do you win is, when I look at somebody like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, she won in New York. The districts she represents are not San Francisco. San Francisco, know better than I, but my understanding is, it's kind of the old guard, Democratic establishment, a lot of young people, but do they come out? So how does somebody like you, a month or so till election, also given, these negative headlines you've had to deal with, how do you gather enough new voters? Because I think in this case, it would be that Bernie strategy of galvanizing as much people who don't vote or have become cynical and stop voting for a couple cycles. How do you win? Because it's going to take a huge amount of voter turnout, a lot of new voters, and Pelosi, she's going to have those traditional, particularly older voters, people with money, six-figure types, to come out for her.
And every labor union in the city, just to be clear, like the establishment progressives in San Francisco don't support their own stated principles. They support the incumbent because she's powerful. So the headwinds I'm running into include a local media landscape that has been more inclined to print lies about me than anything about what I'm running on or the issues. The local progressive organized establishment abandoning this race in the face of this smear campaign that ultimately promoted the incumbent and the establishment. We've been outspent 15-1. Nancy Pelosi is the leading corporate fundraiser in the House, and every labor union in the city has undermined the interests of its rank and file by endorsing the incumbent who opposes working class interests. So those are very profound headwinds. On the other side of it, billboards for our campaign have literally been written in the sky. On September 9th, the sky was blood red at high noon. And I can't conceive of or even fathom a more compelling and widely visible indication that something is amiss and wrong. And I think the real question in our race, it's a test of our democracy, and it's a test, frankly, of San Francisco. Is San Francisco care enough about our own principles and the future to show up for them now that we have the first chance in a generation to do it? Or are we so ultimately brainwashed by corporate media sources that we falsely think we're being represented by a line of the left who, in fact, paves the road to fascism? And all I can do is articulate the platform and reach as many voters as we can. I will say that people with an interest in the future who share our principles, anyone, anywhere, can make a difference. We are actively phone banking and text banking. Anybody's welcome to join us at shahid.fyi/volunteer. If anybody dialed for Bernie, the system will look very familiar. The people that I hired after we won the primary were a bunch of Bernie campaign veterans. And so that's why the campaign accelerated so much before the smear campaigns hit. And it's why we're still poised to win this race in spite of all the headwinds that you described. I'd put it this way. The way we win the race is simply by the failure of the establishment becoming so inescapably obvious. And it is now so inescapably obvious. 250,000 Americans, practically, we're close to that, have died from a disease that was, frankly, it didn't have to be this bad. No other country in the world has suffered the way we have. And one big reason for that, the most obvious reason for that, is that we don't let people get care or medicine when they need it. We condition access to care on cost on the market. And that was always an abuse of human rights. And now it's just senselessly stupid and idiotic. And we see it demonstrated in the statistics every day with every person dying alone, gasping for breath. We are seeing the failure of an establishment with every family that's getting evicted because they can't go to work while the government and the economy shut down. That is a failure of leadership and policy. With every person who has to flee their home because the entire state, the entire West Coast has been on fire, that's a failure of policy. And these failures of policy demand accountability. I'm grateful for the chance to be the first Democrat to face Nancy Pelosi in a generation. And if San Franciscans care enough about change and want it, I'm looking forward to representing our city in Washington in the next congressional session.
And I just want to read a question from a viewer, Super Chat, Michael Williams. Shahid, explain why anyone should bother voting when both parties are essentially the same when it comes to fiscal, foreign, and military policy. I'll add on to that. Obviously this isn't about your race, but when you look at Biden versus Trump, I understand the dangers of Trump, but I also think it's my job to tell viewers the truth. Even if Biden wins, I mean, he's basically told Wall Street donors, you're good, right? Biden has not called for anything to meet the moment during the pandemic, not a universal basic income, not expanding Medicare, basically, some vagueness about restoring the soul of something. So he's not, even if we get rid of Trump, the wine moms and the upper class will, be able to go back to brunch. But those who have lost their jobs, those who have no health care right now, those in San Francisco that are victims of gentrification, they're pretty much in the same place. I mean, obviously, if you're black, brown, you face a graver threat from Trump. We understand that. But what do you say to those discouraged people, both on the federal level from voting, but also people in San Francisco? Maybe they're watching this for the first time. They weren't going to vote. Why should people vote if basically both parties, there's so much overlap?
It's very difficult for me to defend the Biden campaign. I don't have a great deal in common with his platform. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, very early on after the field coalesced around Biden, made the point that in no other country would we be in the same party, because frankly, he's much closer to Trump than he is to us. And I share the skepticism of the opportunity for change. In fact, if I am so fortunate to represent San Francisco and Washington, I will be fighting the next administration from the left, whoever it is. I don't know which character of conservatism it will be, if it's Trump's fascism outright, or if it's merely Biden's deference to corporate rule and the military-industrial complex. Neither of those are acceptable to me. And I'm running, the precise reason I am running for Congress is to challenge either of those outcomes. I am an immigrant who cares about the United States and wants to preserve our values in a time of crisis, and wants to retain some modicum of democracy, wants to meet the needs of our communities. And that's why I'm running. I think the disillusion with the parties and the recognition that they do so much to support each other is precisely why I'm trying to knock the leader of the corporate Democratic Party out of her chair. Because as long as she is in Congress, nothing will happen in Congress either, right? I mean, the point about Biden is true with respect to the executive branch. The same thing is true of Nancy Pelosi. As long as she remains in Congress, the Green New Deal will remain a dream. As long as Nancy Pelosi remains in Congress, anytime there's a proposed surveillance authority, it will pass. As long as Nancy Pelosi remains in the House, there won't be any meaningful resistance to this criminal administration or whatever conservative follows him. We need members of Congress who understand the oath of office enough to stand up for it when it matters, who recognize what it means to fight domestic enemies of our Constitution, like our criminal president. We need members of Congress who are close enough to the lived experience of Americans to understand when we're in crisis. My family lost our home when I was 16 years old. It took me 10 years to get my undergrad degree because I worked and went to night school. I understand what it's like to struggle, and I know what people are going through now. And, Nancy Pelosi is as someone who is, let's just say, very removed from any of the crises to which the rest of us are subjected. Either has been unable or remains unwilling to do the job of representing the people of San Francisco and defending the interests of the people of the United States.
And last question, to me, I look at what's going on in California, Portland with these wildfires. Of course, the corporate media, you're lucky if they even talk about climate change. But the dirty little secret, of course, it's the fossil fuel companies. But really what's creating these wildfires is the big banks that Nancy Pelosi is a servant of. These fossil fuel projects are not happening without major banks funding them. We saw that there has been divestment campaigns against some of the big banks that have been successful. But, if you were on a debate stage with Nancy Pelosi, or because frankly, you're going to have to get some of those traditional normie Democrats who mindlessly just go every time and vote for Pelosi, what would be your message for them to rethink? I don't think Bernie necessarily spoke to these older, more traditional Democratic voters the way in terms of think about your grandchildren, think about your children. What would be your message to them to actually take a minute and not automatically vote for Pelosi? Why is she complicit in these wildfires, the climate catastrophe, and why should they, give somebody new a shot?
The policy paradigm of Congress over the last generation is one of deference and active support for the fossil fuel industries, not just in our energy policy, but even our foreign policy, right? Every country we invade for oil is serving that industry. It's like we have an intersectional set of policies designed to serve and subsidize fossil fuel extraction. And it's senseless. There's no reason, frankly, that we should even allow people the monetary incentive to engage in resource plunder inherently robs the future. That's embedded in the business model. And we don't have markets, for instance, in people's votes. We don't have at least legal markets for people's body parts, and that's because the legal regime conditions the market, right? We could just as easily say fossil fuel extraction is a thing that, if it's going to happen, it is not going to happen to make somebody wealthy, but instead because it needs to happen. Like it's a perfect case for nationalization of an industry, just like weapons manufacturing. That's another industry that shouldn't have its own parochial interests driving policy, but we see that happen time and time again. Nancy Pelosi has overseen a historic rise in fracking across the country. She's not been an active agent of seeking climate justice, and in fact has actively stood on the other side. She derides the Green New Deal as the Green New Dream or whatever. And while she has talked a big game about environmentalism, it's really just like every other issue where she claims to stand for progressive interests. It's all talk without policy. This is exactly why she should debate, and why I think that voters in San Francisco who might be coming to the race or considering their options for the first time might also share their interest in a debate. Debates have a crucial role in our democracy. And again, the refusal of an incumbent for 30 years to defend their ideas in public might suggest that their ideas are indefensible. And in fact, that's true here. I think everybody on Pelosi's team knows that if she shows up for a debate against me, it's the end of her career. And it's precisely because her record is indefensible.
Well, I should also add, sorry to interrupt, she's gotten testy when even the most little, the very scarce pushback from journalists. I mean, Jake Tapper kind of asked her, maybe your strategy isn't so good a couple interviews ago, and she got extremely testy to the point of, how dare you question me?
Not only testy and entitled, but she said that there's no point in considering what might have been. And that is the attitude of somebody who doesn't show up for debates for 30 years and treats their office like an entitlement. There's absolutely a point in debating what might have been, because her record is so demonstrably unacceptable. And I don't want to hammer this too hard. The question is it the case that Nancy Pelosi has been actively complicit in advancing conservative goals, or has she simply been unable to stop the steamrolling conservative train? The evidence suggests that she's much more active than we would wish, and that's why we have to remove her from Congress, because as long as Nancy Pelosi is in Congress, the Republican Party will have an easy path to achieve all of its objectives. She, frankly, is the crux of conservative rule. And I can make that case different ways. We haven't talked about this, but just a thing to throw on the table. We talked about a lot of recent issues. The very first thing she did as the speaker in this congressional session was impose the PAYGO rules, conservative Republican accounting rules. This was not an act of weak, ineffectual resistance. This was an act of complicity with conservative goals. And there's absolutely no good reason why a voice actively promoting conservative goals should represent a city that is among the proudest progressive capitals of this country. And I'm eager to offer us a new voice in Washington.
And to end, I just want to read one more viewer super chat. Nancy says, I live in Russian Hill neighborhood in a small rent-controlled apartment in San Francisco. Strongly support Shahid. My, quote, liberal neighbors love Pelosi. So I'm sure there's a lot of that where, you have those older, and it's not, I don't want to be blanket that it's all old people, because there's older progressives too. But that kind of entrenched, they've been fed that Nancy Pelosi is kind of like a yes queen fighter against Trump and Bush, and they might not know underneath all that marketing and branding of her, she's been very complicit in furthering the conservative project.
Yeah, you nailed it. I think it's less generational and much more about how much attention somebody pays. If people who pay attention to politics in San Francisco break for us because they recognize what the incumbent is doing, and people who watch MSNBC or corporate news and don't actually investigate the facts or read independent news sources, they fall for the spin and the corporate propaganda. They think that Nancy Pelosi is Trump's greatest antagonist when she is in fact his greatest enabler in Washington. And that's exactly why we have to replace her. I see ultimately our election as a referendum on how sophisticated San Francisco is, and is it hoodwinked by the Beltway and corporate media, or are we still the proud progressive mecca of the West Coast? And the last piece I just say here is I see in that attitude of the older folks you were describing, if I am guilty of the political crime of saying different things in different crowds, it is basically what I emphasize, and I emphasize climate justice to younger folks and to older folks, because you were mentioning the people who've been here and voted for many times. For those people, what I emphasize, and it's not inconsistent, I have this, these are both parts of my platform, but I emphasize universal health care. You were saying, think about your kids and your grandkids. I say that to younger people. To older people who I wish, to older people, I often say, just think about yourselves. 40% of cancer patients exhaust their life savings within the first year of diagnosis and treatment.
Right.
And any physician will talk who deals in palliative or end-of-life care about the spend down to Medicaid. That's our policy, is to use sickness as an extraction opportunity and then kick sick people into the street. And I don't think any American wants that. We are better than that as a civilization. We can do better than that. All we have to do is change some people in Congress who are willing to stand with our communities before corporations. And I'm excited to be a part of that wave in the next session.
And one more time, where can people find out more if they want to volunteer or help you in some way?
Check us out online. We're at shahidforchange.us, or on any of the major social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Shahid for Change.
Cool. Thank you, Shahid. We'll be in touch.
Right on. Thanks for having me on, Jordan. It's always great to be with you.
So, that was Shahid Buttar. By the way, I wasn't cutting him off. I only had an hour with him, so I was about to wrap. I think, for the most part, answered questions on criticisms, accusations, very, very effectively. And you're honestly, a huge reason you're unfortunately not going to see debate between those two is, frankly, most of what he was saying is a lot of substance and expertise, and Democrats like Nancy Pelosi don't run on substance and expertise. They run on vague branding slogans like Stronger Together, Restoring the Soul of America, and identity politics. They don't run on specifics, and they don't run on bread table economic issues. They certainly don't run on the military-industrial complex. So it's up to San Francisco, really. It's up to the people of San Francisco. I'm sure that there has been a media blackout in San Francisco, and when there hasn't been a media blackout, it's probably been just reprinting whatever accusations are out there. But, a lot of times with these incumbent, longtime Democrats, they tend to get a little arrogant, maybe, sleep. We know that with Joe Crowley when he didn't take Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign too seriously, and she won. So I'm not going to lie to you. I think it's a huge, huge uphill climb for Shahid to defeat Nancy Pelosi, but nothing is impossible. I do believe that. So we'll see what happens. Let me text Jen because she's going to be coming on in a few moments. Get ready. I'm going to call you because Jen is hitting the road tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Whoa.
She's actually going to be going out to California, Portland, Oregon, and several other places. Look at that graphic. So Jen is going to be covering the wildfires. She's going to be covering the wildfires out in Portland, in California. She's also going to be covering protests in Portland. The Proud Boys, the white supremacy group, are having, shall we say, a gathering this weekend. So Jen is going to be there for that. She'll be with John, too, our cameraman. Obviously, we'll be taking precautions to keep everybody safe. And there's a really interesting story on Trump and the border, which the media is not covering. It also has to do with indigenous people. So I'll wait for Jen to come on. So that should be a members video, but Jen is going to share what that story is about that she's going to San Diego for. So she's going to be covering a bunch of different stories. So stay tuned. She'll be on in about 10 minutes. So while we wait for Jen, I want to go over another story. By the way, 520 people watching, 398 likes. I need another 100 or so of you. Please smash that like button. Before I get on to my next story, because it's going to take like 10, 15 minutes for Jen to get on, I want to I woke up to this beautiful message. Savannah Cooper, $500 in our reporting GoFundMe. Holy cow, Savannah. I thank you for that amazing contribution, Savannah, wherever you are. I don't know if you're watching right now. Gets us to $121,390. It ain't cheap to report. Jen, like I just said, going to Oregon, California, might be going to Arizona or Nevada. We're sending Jen, a cameraman. You got hotels, you got flights, you got rent-a-cars, food. Broadcasting costs money. We pay over $500, sometimes more, if we go over the data limit for our live view. So we really appreciate it. And anybody else, you might not be able to do 500, but if you could do 5 or 15 or 50, whatever, please. We don't talk, we walk. We hit the road like nobody else. And as always, if you can, sign up as a Status Coup member to support this in-the-field investigative reporting that very few outlets are doing consistently. Sign up at statuscoup.com/join. That's statuscoup.com/join for as low as $5 a month. So I want to move on here. And let me, now that I don't have to be so formal because my interview's done, I'll put on my brand new Status Coup hat. Woo! Isn't that smoking? Mm-hmm. Go get your Status Coup hat in the Status Coup store. I'll put the link in the super chat. Let me get the link. You could get your Status Coup hat or whatever other items you want in the Status Coup store, including hoodies. It is getting a little chilly here in New York. I don't know about your part of the country or world. You could get Status Coup swag wherever you're watching because we do have international viewers. But I want to play this clip. I got one thing on Trump and then one thing on Biden. This is Trump, we know, is a sociopath. This is moving into psychopath territory. Just bear with me if you didn't hear this last night.
Wants to impose a $4 trillion disease. We didn't know it. Now we know it. It affects elderly people with heart problems and other problems. If they have other problems, that's what it really affects. That's it. You know, in some states, thousands of people, nobody young, below the age of 18, like nobody. They have a strong immune system. Who knows? You take your hat off to the young because they have a hell of an immune system, but it affects virtually nobody. It's an amazing thing. By the way, open your schools. Everybody open your schools.
I don't want to do the cable news thing of just like outrage, 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 Trump, Trump, Trump. But literally on the eve of 200,000 deaths related to the coronavirus. And again, I don't even think that number's correct. I think it's a lot more than that. There's a lot of people that have died at their homes that have not been counted. I think that's going to be revised upwards at some point. That this man has the audacity to say it affects very few people. It's astounding. I mean, it's not just the fact that it's obviously factually absurd. It is immoral. I mean, all the people that have not been able to have proper funerals for their family. All the people that could not even be physically next to their loved ones who have died. All the people, imagine your loved one is in the hospital or something like that. You rush to the hospital. All the people that while their loved ones were dying had to speak on FaceTime or through a nurse on speakerphone. All the Trump supporters who have got this and possibly died from his super spreading events. This is a psychopath. And by the way, one of the traits of a psychopath, I didn't go to school for psychology, but I know a little bit about it, is they don't understand they lie so much, particularly to themselves, that they no longer can separate what's reality and what's a lie. Reality versus, fantasy, it's all blurred together. He might very well actually think, it doesn't affect that many people. 200,000, that's like what I lose on a casino in one night. I mean, it's outrageous. And what's even more outrageous, well, it's not more outrageous, but it goes to show you, if you had representing the Democratic Party right now, just a living, breathing man, woman, white, black, brown, doesn't even matter what age, if you had representing the Democratic Party right now, just anyone who could emote hope, anyone that could emote, here is exactly what I'm going to do to give you relief on healthcare, on economics, and it's just plain spoken, easy to digest, Medicare for all. $2,000 a month while this pandemic is going on. Free pre-K. A bold vision. Even, by the way, somebody who doesn't even believe it is just feeding you bullshit to get elected, which politicians do all the time. I give you President Obama when he was a candidate. If you had a half living, breathing Democratic candidate who could offer something more than restoring the soul of America and build back better and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, Yang's one of them. Not my cup of tea, but he would be better than Biden. We would already be talking about his first term because he'd be blowing out Trump by 20 to 25 points nationally. The battleground states would not be, Pennsylvania right now is 4 or 5 points. Wisconsin, Michigan, 5 to 8 points. It would not even be close, folks. But you don't have that. And this is how extremists, conservatives, Tea Partiers, birthers, just the most vile of the vile politicians, man or woman on the Republican side, this is how they continue to win. because their opposition is empty platitudes, not offering the real forgotten man and woman, those people that are working 2 to 3 jobs, those people who maybe they have health care but can't even use it because it's too expensive, those people who don't have health care, those people who are drinking poisoned water, those people who are victims to gentrification and have been moved out, have had to move out of their communities because they've been priced out. When you don't offer anything other than vague consultant-driven platitudes, it keeps elections close, even against psychopaths like President Trump. And that's what we have here. In addition to saying, coronavirus barely affects anyone, in the same speech, he talked about the genes. Oh, you people from Milwaukee, you have wonderful genes. You know who else talked about genes and citizens and their superior genes? A man named Adolf Hitler. I've been one of the few people who hasn't gone there. I don't think Trump and his horribleness is quite to that level yet. But Adolf Hitler, how that all started was talk like that. When the president at a speech at a rally yesterday was talking about how the people of Milwaukee, you got superior genes. Just happened to be an all-white crowd. Yet, right now, I know what the polls say, but I don't feel it's a slam dunk that Biden's going to win. Frankly, right now, Crystal Ball covered it on Rising, I believe today. I'll cover it this week. Pennsylvania right now might toss over 100,000 ballots because of a technicality related to something called naked ballots. So, as terrible as Trump is, be just as mad at the Democratic Party, who, why is this even close? And by the way, not only is Joe Biden, it's bad enough that he has just ignored progressives, basically said, take a hike, I don't need you. Here's what he had to say today.
Even if you could address our camera directly, talk to the voters that are worried about socialism and you raising taxes.
First of all, I guarantee, I promise, I've never broken my word. Anyone making less than $400,000 will not see one single penny in their tax raised. Number two, I beat the socialists. That's how I got elected. That's how I got the nomination. Do I look like a socialist? Look at my career, my whole career. I am not a socialist. Number three, what we're going to do is make sure that we make people begin to pay their fair share. I'm not trying to punish anybody, but the idea that 19 corporations making billions of dollars pay zero in taxes, the idea you can be making $1 billion or millions of dollars like Donald Trump did and acknowledge when he was trying to open up a casino in New Jersey, they had to show his.
I beat the socialist. The socialist of whom's voters I'm too stupid to realize I need more than moderate Republicans. I beat the socialist. And, I saw on Twitter people were saying, Jordan, you're making a bigger deal than it is. He wasn't, criticizing Bernie. I don't know. To me, it sounded pretty derogatory about socialism. To me, it sounded pretty dismissive of the person you beat and his movement. If he actually cared, if his campaign cared to persuade and court the millions of people that voted for Bernie, many of them who either are not going to vote for Biden or are on the fence about voting for Biden, you would say, as I made clear in the campaign, I don't agree with socialism. However, Bernie Sanders Bernie Sanders calls himself a democratic socialist. We might not agree with everything, but I agree with many of his principles. There's a way of saying I'm not a socialist while being deferential and complimentary of Bernie Sanders and his movement. But the problem is Joe Biden does dismiss Bernie Sanders, just like the Democratic Party dismisses Bernie Sanders. Joe Biden does have venom towards the idea of socialism. Remember during one of the debates, he said, yeah, this is America, pal, when Bernie referenced Denmark or whatever country he was referencing, their system. It's the total arrogance and dismissiveness, forget the term socialism, but of Bernie and the voters that have represented Bernie. Why would you not be doing a full court press on those voters? Because some morons around you that are from Bill Clinton's era and from Barack Obama's era are telling you, no, there's more opportunity. There's more opportunity in getting moderate Republican votes? No, there's not. You want to know how I know? Look at Mitt Romney. Is Mitt Romney considered one of these moderate Republicans? Well, he just came out today and said, yeah, no, I'm down with the Republicans and their coup d'etat of the Supreme Court. I'm going to side with the utter hypocrisy of Republicans completely flip-flopping on 2016. No, we can't name a Supreme Court justice or confirm a Supreme Court justice. At that point, like 9 months before the election. Now, amnesia. No, it's fine because it's in our favor. These resistance people who have made Mitt Romney and people like him into our friends. Well, Mitt Romney, who is quote unquote one of these moderate Republicans, showed you what Joe Biden's campaign doesn't realize. Moderate Republicans do not make decisions or vote based on morality, folks. They do it based on self-interest. They want their tax cuts, quote unquote moderate Republicans, that Joe Biden is catering to. Most of them are avidly pro-life, and that's a major consideration for them. Most of them are down with deregulation. Most of them are hardcore Blue Lives Matter. How do I know this? Because I've traveled the country and I've spoken with a lot of them. Are there some Republicans that will put the country first and their taxes will go up a little bit? Some. Not more than that bucket of progressive voters that voted for Bernie. Not more than that bucket of voters under the age of 40, black and brown. That's who you should be courting. Not John Kasich, not Colin Powell, Meg Whitman, Michael Bloomberg, and the rest of these gas bags. But it's almost like Joe Biden wants to rerun Hillary Clinton's campaign, only stupider. It's really, really something. It's really, really something. Anyway, stick with me for 1 minute. I'm about to dial Jen on the Skype. So we're doing this live, so it might be a little choppy. Hold on, farewell, I've come to see you go. Hold on. All right, let me see if I could do this live. Hold on, nobody could hear you. There you are. Can you move your seat over a little bit to the left?
I can. It's kind of big, but I'll sit more to the left.
All right. Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Framing isn't my strong suit. Hold on 1 second. Okay. I think everybody could see you, hear you, all that. 1 second. Okay. Jen Dyes, Status Coup co-founder. Where you been? What you doing? And where you going?
I've been a crazy person today. I haven't showered. I apologize for looking like something the cat dragged in. So all day today, I'll start this with some secrecy. All day today, I've been doing stuff that I can't reveal quite yet, but definitely on this trip, at a certain point, I will be able to talk about what I've done all day. Specifically for members, I will do that. So statuscoup.com/join to get that out of the way. So as you guys know, I'm going on an infield trip. John, the freelance cameraman, is going with me. We are headed to Portland, which, as you know, Oregon is having a horrible time with devastating wildfires, just absolutely awful. And one of the fires is pretty close to Portland. So definitely going down there. Entire communities are just devastated. And, you know, this is a time where we're in a pandemic, and a lot of people were struggling anyway. And now to find that their homes are gone, or things in the community that they relied on were gone, it's a really important topic. And I think it's something that it's not been spotlighted in the news recently. You know, it was like headlines for a little while when everything was orange, like the sky was orange all over the West Coast. But now people are like picking up in the aftermath, like trying to pick up their lives. So we'll be reporting and interviewing people. There are ongoing protests in Portland as well. You may have seen that Donald Trump has designated New York City, Portland, and I think Seattle, correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, as anti, like, what did they call it? Like what was the term?
Anarchists.
Yeah, anarchists. So like anarchist places. So people are fighting against that, like these Antifa people, ongoing protests. News article by Ken Klippenstein just came out in The Nation showing that law enforcement have been tapping, or not tapping, but getting data, like pulling data from protesters' phones. So that should be headlines, and it definitely is not. So looking into some of that, and just whatever might come our way. Some of this is going to be really fluid as we're on the West Coast, but I definitely have some exciting things planned. I put a lot of work into planning this because I really want to deliver news that's really relevant right now, and interviews that are really relevant right now, but also cover things that aren't necessarily making headlines, but that you guys are interested in and that I feel are so important to talk about. So one of those things will take us to San Diego. So we're flying from Portland down all the way down to San Diego because there are currently protests at the border, you know, San Diego and Tijuana, against the wall, Donald Trump's fake wall or pretend wall, but it's headed by an indigenous group. So we have this indigenous group who is trying to, you know, fight for the rights of immigrants, trying to fight for the rights of humans, and they're working really hard on this, you know, joined by other protesters fighting for the same thing. But now we have Trump supporters who are fighting back. And when I say fighting back, I mean literally. A woman, a Trump supporter, attacked one of these indigenous protesters a couple of days ago. So things are heating up there, and obviously I think it's a really relevant story. Indigenous topics.
To be clear, isn't the wall that he's proposing partly going through their land as well?
You know, I do need to double check on that specific point. I don't actually know. Okay. I'll have to look at like the boundaries of their reservation and things like that. But it, you know, it definitely impacts their way of life, and we have a very long history of really not caring about what happens to the indigenous people as a country. So I find this story so important. News organizations don't report on indigenous causes, not nearly enough. And obviously immigration is a huge topic right now. So we'll see where that story takes us. So I'm in the process of setting up contacts and interviews for that, and we'll see what's happening on the nights when we're there. Then we're going to be going up to Los Angeles. So Los Angeles, right near Los Angeles, is one of the largest fires, and this is the Bobcat fire. I think Tina, who freelances for us often, you guys love Tina, she said it's about 8 miles away from LA. So we'll be going and covering this Bobcat fire, which is just horrible and definitely ongoing. And it's just another example of the fact that climate change is destroying us. We will also be reporting on some, alt-right activities in LA, any protests that pop up, kind of playing it by ear. Tina and I will do some live streams together, which always goes well. She has great insight into certain things, especially things happening on the West Coast. She's really bubbly, as you guys will remember, and really just interesting to talk to and listen to. So I'm excited about that as well. And then the last leg of the trip is still a little bit up in the air. I want to see where polling takes us and where some contacts recommend. So one of the factors that's going to decide this election in 2020 is the Latino vote. So we have Biden, who is leading in the Latino vote in swing states like Nevada and Arizona. It's still scary because certain groups like young adult men are leaning towards Trump. Like they're a group that is easily swayable, pollsters have found. So there are, Biden groups and Democrats who are working to try to sway those people over to Biden, those men over to Biden, whereas right now they're kind of leaning more towards Trump. So there's a lot of factors going on there. Arizona and Nevada are particularly important spots. So we'll be doing some reporting there, interviewing activists, interviewing undecided voters and things like that. So it's a big trip. And I will say, I have not gone over in this spiel I just did everything that I'm going to cover, and that is that's for safety reasons. So I promise you that what we're going to cover is a must watch, and I think a real potential turning point for better or for worse in our country. So definitely some secret planning going on as well. And I'm looking forward to this trip. It's going to be, we're going to up and down and all around. So it's going to be a really hectic trip, but I'm excited by it because I think that these stories are so important.
A few things. Number one, maybe you have to double bag it in terms of masks. You got the fire and coronavirus. So yeah, definitely. People don't realize, we're still in a pandemic. So Jen and John going out there, they're flying. Obviously, in addition to the smoke and poor air quality, there's a pandemic going on. So as journalists, we're taking risks. So keep that in mind. Obviously, Jen spent a lot of time, looking into which airlines were being the most responsible. And, you guys will be safe as far as...
Which is Delta, by the way.
Yeah, as far as masks and all those things. My second question is, what are your safety precautions for your phone since you're 0-2? I mean, obviously for yourself, but you've already gone through 2 phones in the last 6 months in terms of being attacked. If you're going to the border and some other things, I have your second phone right here that's been destroyed.
Oh my God.
So what is the plan for protecting?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that as part of this. Is what kind of it would be so me to lose 3 phones in 1 year.
Well, you didn't lose. You were attacked,
to have them destroyed in 1 year. I'm going to take the best precautions I possibly can. But on the other hand, I'm a journalist, and that means going where the story is. And that often, especially in today's world, means being in places that are not necessarily sit in the studio. We actually go out there. So whether it's, certain protesters don't want journalists there, certain counter protesters don't want journalists there, certain police officers don't want journalists there, people are really pumped up at the border wall on different sides, so you never know what could happen, either to me as a person or to John, but also to things like my phone. It's an easy target for sure for people who don't want you there reporting.
And by the way, folks, relax. I'm just kidding. I care more about her than her phone. It was a joke. Anyway.
Oh my gosh, are people fussing about that? It's clearly a joke, guys.
Yeah.
I will be stepping up my safety game. I'm getting a Kevlar vest. So
Which brings me to Jen, because things like a bulletproof vest and other items do cost a little bit of money, as does flights, hotels, trains, which you're going to take from certain destinations, food, live view, which is how we broadcast, costs a lot of money. So we had an amazing donation yesterday from Savannah, $500. But why should people support either through GoFundMe or hint hint Status Coup membership, which we want to get back up there, $5 a month, statuscoup.com/join.
Planning steps before anyone else.
So members will get a heads up through video and other ways on behind the scenes planning and other things from the trip. So what's your pitch? Why should people support?
Well, it really, I'm trying to be as frugal as possible. Yesterday, I spent 14 hours planning this trip. I am nowhere near done. It's not that I'm wasting time. It's that I am cross-referencing various sites with different prices, different travel options, making sure that the travel options line up, which what I feel are the most important stories to cover, the most important locations, the doable locations. There's a lot that goes into the planning, and part of that is because I am so conscious of cost. I ended up, I'm going to Portland one day earlier than I thought, and the reason for that is because it is impossible to get a bulletproof vest right now. With everything that's going on, gun sales and bulletproof vest sales have skyrocketed. So there were none anywhere near me. To get one online would take over a month. So I was able to find one guy in Portland who has a little shop and is selling bulletproof vests, like one of the only places in the country, but he's leaving. So he's leaving to go somewhere on vacation or something. So I have to get there in order to get this vest. The vest itself, we're going to meet up. He's going to bring me several different options. So I want to be as safe as possible. It is not out of the question for a bullet to go off at one of these locations. When we were in, I guess that was Wisconsin, Milwaukee, outside of Milwaukee at the Trump rally where there were counter protesters, there was a point where I was literally in between an assault rifle, and then I don't know what guns are, I don't know the names for them, but they're a little gun and then an assault rifle, on opposite sides. I was literally right in between the two. So I stayed and I got the shots that I needed because this other guy standing next to one of the gun holders was yelling the N-word, was yelling really racist things, and I felt journalistically I needed to get those things on camera. But I was also oh shoot, I really don't feel super comfortable right now. So I'm going to get a vest to protect myself better. These vests can cost anywhere from $300 to $800, depending on, the brand, of course, but also the level of protection. And there's all sorts of things that go into it. So that is a huge cost. It's one that, Jordan in particular is okay, you need to make sure that you get the most protective one. Don't cheap out on this specifically. And I agree. At first I was looking at the very, very bottom level options, but it's something important. It's also something we cannot readily afford. So we're really depending on your generosity, the generosity of viewers and members and everyone who cares about journalism like this to help us afford that vest, because anything could happen. Now, there's so much going on. The country's becoming more and more divided, and people on both sides are really arming up. So I think it is necessary. There are other considerations, like the fact that we are going to 4 different locations. So the travel costs add up. Flying from 2 people from Portland to San Diego, I like there were, most of the ticket options were around $200 a person, but I specifically chose the single one that I could find that was $100 per person. It's going to take 5 hours to get there, where normally it would take 2.5. But to save that money is more important to me. On the other hand, even spending $200 is a lot for a small company like us. We're lucky enough that we'll get to stay with Tina in LA and save on some hotel costs, but in the other locations, we do have hotel costs. San Diego certainly is not cheap. Portland certainly is not cheap. So we'll at certain points have to have a rental car. We're going to be frugal about food, but we do have to eat. There truly is a lot that goes into it, and I really hope, I don't want to come across as begging, but I really hope that you guys can help us, because like adding up the costs already, and I haven't even fully booked everything yet, it makes me really nervous. I think it's exceptionally important that we do this, but it does make me very nervous about the cost, because we are in a pandemic. Like, who knows what could happen tomorrow or next week. So our goal here is to raise enough money to fully cover this trip. Beyond that, you know, we would love to grow memberships and things like that, but we have to as a company.
Right. And I should say, for those that don't know, in 2016, when I was at the Young Turks, I got a vest for the RNC convention in Cleveland because Ohio is open carry, and there was a lot of chatter on folks, Trump people coming with assault rifles and things like that. So, you know, to the Young Turks' credit, they got me one. And even with the vest, which luckily nothing happened, it's still pretty scary. I mean, I remember I was in an interview with a really Islamophobic, hateful guy, and there was 3 or 4 Trump supporters around us. 2 of them had, I don't know exactly whether they were AR-15s or something, but mega assault rifles next to them. And then as a journalist, you're kind of put into a position, my natural disposition is just to go hardcore, challenge them, this and that, but I'm also a human being. I don't know these 3 people next to me who are cheering on this Islamophobe in front of me that I'm interviewing. I don't really know what's in their mind or how itchy their trigger finger is. So how much do I really want to press these people when there's guns all around me? Frankly, do I even want to interview people if that's the case? Would I rather just narrate things, show what's going on? I mean, Jen has 2 kids, you know, I don't want to die if I don't have to. And we won't get into every detail, but she will be covering certain rallies that are going to have armed white supremacists. So, yeah. 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 And we'll be talking, Jen, John, and I separately, you know, about ways to stay safe. So the last thing I'll say is, you know, obviously the media right now is not going to be covering most of these stories. They are full on Supreme Court. Don't get me wrong, that's important. They are continuing the play-by-play of the coronavirus. It's important, but a lot of these stories are going to totally fall through the cracks, and that's why we are out there covering these things. So please, if you're not a member yet, sign up. statuscoup.com/join. Like Jen said, you will get behind-the-scenes content from her trip. If you can, definitely consider supporting us in the GoFundMe. Like I said, we got a really generous donation last night, but we need more to fund this trip. So I'll put the link in. And, you know, I would say, Jen, you could, you know, say whatever else you want, but I would say this is why we exist. I mean, Jen and I are not satisfied when we're like doing live streams from home. We want to be out there. It's been challenging to be out there. obviously, because there's a pandemic. We can't always be out there because we're a startup and we don't have any major, massive plutocrats funding us. But we would much, much rather be out there in the field, interviewing people. So definitely support. I put the GoFundMe link in there, membership, statuscoup.com/join. What are your other words, Jen?
I'll give a little hint about what I'm going to reveal to members only about my secret planning. Part of it has to do with the Ruskies, so the Russians. So that's a hint. You'll never guess what I'm talking about.
Don't give me Russiagate stuff.
It's nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Russiagate. That is a good clarification point because I don't want people to think that at all.
When I hear Ruskies, I think Russia.
It is Russia.
Oh, okay.
It has zero to do with Russiagate, though. Zero.
Okay.
I am using them in order to further a certain story that I want, that is important on this trip. So I'm using some Russians.
Wow, that sounds very Carrie Matheson. And another question, Jen, because I've been a little disappointed here. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. We have these brand new Status Coup hats that I'm wearing, and they're not flying off the shelf yet. What the hell is going on?
Well, flying off the shelves is all relative. People are so excited about these hats. People have been wanting these hats for so long. But I think one thing is that people hadn't really been able to see them yet. So some people might have been holding off to actually see what the finished product is. And as you can see on Jordan's lovely head, there it is. This is what you guys could have to represent the coup. It really does help us. So Teespring gives us about half of the cost of the hat. So when you buy the hat, you're getting something cool, but you are also helping to support our reporting. So it is a win-win for everybody. And definitely check them out.
Somebody asked are they fitted, so they are adjustable. You could adjust them. My fiance.
Where's the Knots hat?
Yeah, Anat just left, so I'm trying to see. She just took her flat brim hat. Damn it. But we also have the flat brim, which I think she modeled yesterday. So. You could get flat brim, regular. It's all wonderful. Somebody said, Jordan, I just bought one. So definitely get in the Status Coup store. It's not just the hats. I mean, we got the hoodies. It's getting cold out there. Now there's socks, dog hoodies I just ordered for Rusty. I can't wait till that comes. So definitely get your gear.
And I got a Knot and myself fanny packs because they're totally back in style. Status Coup fanny pack. Also Status Coup dog hoodies. One is coming for my dog and one is coming for Jordan's dog, Rusty.
Mm-hmm. And so I was wearing my Status Coup hoodie yesterday. Carl Knight, $10. Let me guess. Status Coup is funded by Putin. Oh, don't get the rumor mill started. Jen A, $14.99. Here's a drink on me, Jen. Oh, thank you. Jilly Love, $9.99. Best vest and gas mask Jen Fund. Cheryl Tyler, $20. Get the best Ven, Jen. Brian Frederick, $1.99. What happened to Resistance hero Mitt Romney? He came back to Earth. Jessica, I believe, sent a super chat. I lost it, asking if my views on the term concentration camp have changed in light of the ICE story that you were covering about forced sterilization, hysterectomies. I know that you'll be following up on that when you get back from your trip. My views personally haven't changed. I don't know. You could disagree, but as a Jew, when I hear concentration camps, I think of Auschwitz. Not to say what's happening at the border or what happened with these immigrant women and forced sterilization is not heinous. I just think people are very fixated on the term concentration camp. To me, that has a connotation of trains to a camp and bodies being thrown in burn pits. So you don't have to agree. Maybe it's just because I'm Jewish and that's how I was raised. But no, I don't agree with the term concentration camp. Something could be heinous without having to call it, equated to the Holocaust. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I actually, so when everybody started to call them concentration camps, I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then you and I talked about it, and I listened to you talk about it, back when this first started to come to light and people started to use that term. And I've totally come around to your point of view, because I think it is important to listen to your perspective on this, because you are Jewish, and then it really makes sense, because when you think of concentration camp, it does bring forth a very specific and horrific image, and it doesn't take away from the immigration camps, the detention camps, but terms that have become ingrained with a certain point in time and a certain set of actions, including the gas chambers and the burn pits. I think that it is important to have it be in its time and have it reflect that specific horrific place. I'm not explaining it well, but I've come around to the way your thoughts on it are.
Yeah, and I'm not even that religious. It's just, whether you're religiously Jewish or not, you're raised being told about the Holocaust. I've watched movies, documentaries, so people could call things whatever they want. I just don't consider, as heinous as it is, and Jen is going to be covering a story on the border and the wall and this stupidity.
I'm hoping to go to a detention center there too.
Yes. So from that sad segue to the final thing, people should donate. People should become a member. Support Jen. Let me tell you something. It's exhausting doing possibly 3 states, multiple cities in a span of like 7-8 days. So she and John will be reporting and support us. GoFundMe. I put the link in the super chat. I'll put it again. But most importantly, we just got to keep it real. Coronavirus has definitely, affected us as far as our growth. We're growing. It's not like we're dying, but our model is membership. That is ultimately how we're going to grow to the point that we could hire other reporters, additional marketing, social media, people to do more of the business stuff that Jen and I would rather not do. So if you've been on the fence, get off. Obviously, if you don't have the money, if you're struggling, we get it. But if you do have, $5 a month, statuscoup.com/join. I promise you, other independent outlets, air quote, will not be covering these stories in the field. So any other words, Jen?
I'll just say that I have a goal of getting at least 50 members on this road trip. The last road trip we went on to the DNC and Chicago and other spots, Flint, we got about 70 new members. So I'm really hoping to break that record, but I want at least 50 new members starting now.
Because I want 100.
I fly out tomorrow, and so let's start now. Start the countdown. So join statuscoup.com/join. I'll be doing a ton of behind the scenes stuff on my time reporting, and I promise you this is not going to be like a walk in the park of a reporting trip. This is going to be tough. So I will share the good, the bad, and the ugly with you, all the behind the scenes. And also, you might say, oh, it's just $5, but it all adds up. And this is what sustains us. People's memberships at $5 a month, it's reliable income every single month. So if you are not a member yet, please join statuscoup.com/join. I also want to let you guys know that, like I've done on the last 2 road trips we went on, I'm going to be doing a specific blog update page too, with behind the scenes pictures and text of what we're doing, links to all the videos, and I will have a specific fundraiser up for this trip. So that will be available. You can support us via PayPal or Stripe when that's ready. If you want to jump the gun, you can go to the last road trips page. That's still up, and support through that link. But otherwise, tonight, before I have that page set up, GoFundMe is so valuable to us. They only take 3% of the what you give us. So it really helps when you support us there. GoFundMe.com/status-coup-news. I'll feel so much better about getting, a bulletproof vest and the safety equipment that John and I need, if we do have some support even before I take off. It's definitely going to be a wild, wild trip.
And also, I'll add, all of this is for nothing if you don't know when she's live. So if you're not on our text list, join our text list, because YouTube, 9 out of 10 times, will not notify you when we're live, or will notify you an hour after we're done. So join our text list right now. Text 370-370 and type in COUP. That's 370-370. Type in COUP, because Jen and John will be going live at different times, different days. And if you join our text list, you will get a text message when she's live. Thank you, Jen, for the hard work planning this. And we will see you out on the West Coast.
Yeah, maybe I'll do a members video from the airport before I take off tomorrow and along the journey. That'll be fun.
I'll sign up just for that. statuscoup.com/join. Join. $5 a month. It's worth it. All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. That was Jen. All right. That was Jen. We also had Shahid Buttar. Great show today. I will be back tomorrow. If something breaks earlier, obviously, I'll be back. Let me read a couple comments, questions, concerns before I go. I did see several people commenting that they just got hats, so that's awesome. There's the link for the hats. You could also, browse and get other stuff. So we can, there's other shirts, socks, pillowcases, posters, phone covers, with all Status Coup logos. So keep it, purchase whatever you want. Bye everyone. Stay safe. All right. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.